Hey, what's happening, guys? So what I'm going to do for this lesson right here is we're going to try to use these yellow circles as positive. You can see I've labeled them positive. These red circles right here are negative. Now, if you're working at home and you don't have yellow and red circles, that's okay. You could use coins if you want. So if you want to make pennies positive, that's fine. Dimes negative, that would work. If you want to use Legos and paper clips, that works. You just get two small objects that you have enough of. I think the highest number I go up to is about 7. And make sure you clearly label which one's positive and which one's negative. Now I'm also going to allocate this space right here, this blank space, to showing my work, to where I'm putting my objects. Because you're going to have a bunch of objects in front of you, whether you're using the chips with colors like I am, or if you're using something else. So I want you to put those like kind of off to the side, so that in front of you, all you can see is a blank space, because that's where you're going to have your math work. But one other thing. I want to make sure that you do this work on your own, independently. It's okay to make mistakes. I think that's the best way to learn, but you're not going to get much out of this if you're just looking at the person next to you and seeing how they do it and then copying it down yourself. Truly make mistakes, and then I can give you some feedback to see if we can correct your errors, and hopefully you get better throughout this. Two big goals with this. Number one, I want to be able to add any two integers. So an integer is all whole numbers. So anything, from 1 on up. Actually, 0 is a whole number too. 0 all the way up to, the thousands, the millions, the billions. We're going to focus on single digits today, but I want you to be able to add those positive numbers with negative numbers. And I also want you to be able to tell me, without even doing any formal calculations, if an answer is going to be negative, positive, or 0, and how can you tell that? Without further ado, I'd like you to try to make a number positive 3 using the objects that you selected. So for me, I would add 1, 2, 3, and there's my positive 3. And once I check you off, you can remove your objects, but please leave them out in front of you until I've had a chance to check them, or another teacher. Let's try another one. And at any point, if you want to pause this video because my answers are coming out too quick, I definitely recommend doing that. So positive 5 will look like this. Nothing but the yellow chips, that's positive 5. This is saying positive 2, so I start with positive 2, and then we add, looks like another positive, so we'd add another yellow. And so the solution for this, if you count them out, you've probably known this since first grade, right? It's positive 3. But it's important to build on this foundation as we get to incorporating negative integers as well. Positive 3 plus positive 2. And it looks like we have 5 positive yellows here. One thing you want to start to think about is, if we have a positive and we add a positive, what is the solution going to look like in any situation like that? This time it's negative 2, so we start with negative 2. And I'm going to add negative 3. So if I add these all together, there are 5 of them here, but be careful with that answer. 5 isn't the correct answer. You have to say negative 5. Otherwise, I would think that you have 5 yellows. Negative 1. We start with that, and then we add negative 5. And if you look at these, the answer there is 6. Just kidding, it's negative 6, right? Make sure that you have that term negative in front. Now, I asked you a moment ago about what happens when you add a positive with another positive. Here we've got a negative, and then we're adding a negative. What's your solution looking like? This says positive 2, so we're going to add 2. And it says add 1, so we add 1. And so that solution is positive 3. Here we have positive 2, And then it says something a little different. This is the part that's a little more confusing, a little bit more thinking is involved. You have to add 4 negatives. And you see the way that I've lined these up with my positives and my negatives directly across from one another? That's intentional. I want to make sure that I'm emphasizing that these two things right here, positive 1 and negative 1, if we add those together, think about it in real terms. If you have $1 and you owe me $1, how much do you really have? You really have nothing, because you're going to have to give me that dollar. So we want to say that these two things right here, I'm going to circle them in blue just so we don't confuse any colors here. These actually equal 0, and so do these. And they're what we call in mathematics a zero pair. They're a pair of integers. There's 2 of them, but they equal 0. So since these equal 0, we could say that what are we left with here is negative 2. So you start with 4 negatives, but you were only left with 2 negatives because there was 2 positives there. Negative 3 plus positive 3. And like we just said, if I have a negative and a positive together, that really equals 0. So this right here is a 0 pair. This right here is a 0 pair. And this is a 0 pair. So in the end, you're left with 0. So how could we get 0 off of 2 integers? This says negative 2 plus negative 4. We start with 2 negatives, and we add 4 more negatives. And what your brain starts to get trapped into doing, because you get used to certain things, and this is why I presented this problem with 2 negatives at this point in the lesson. A lot of times students will say, okay, well this is a 0 pair right here. That's not a 0 pair. Do these two things equal, you owe me $1 and then you owe me $1? That doesn't equal 0. That means you owe me $2. Pay me back, you cheapskate. So this is negative 2, and then this right here is also negative 2, meaning that this is negative 4, negative 5, and negative 6. So I really shouldn't have even circled that in blue, but I'm just doing that to show you kind of what the bad habit is in this instance. Negative 7 plus 2. So again, I've got some 0 pairs lined up here because these are different colors. There's a positive and a negative, so it does equal 0. And I also put this one off to the side just to show you you can do that like that. As long as you have one of your positives lined up with one of your negatives, it doesn't matter which one is which. Might be easier, if you're looking at this and say negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. It might prevent a mistake of forgetting one, but you can set it up that way. So this will be negative 5. And it makes you wonder, why is it that the answer is negative and not positive? We get 5 plus negative 2. So I line up my integers again, 5 positives in yellow, 2 negatives in red. There's my 0 pair, so this right here is equal to nothing. And this right here is also equal to nothing. I'm left with 3 positives this time. So when the signs were different, I got a positive answer in this instance. The time before, I got a negative answer. It was negative 5, if you recall. So what's kind of happening here? Is the answer going to be positive or negative? How do you predict what the answer will be?